Thank you so much for allowing me to be here and allowing me to, I guess, kind of close you guys out today. And it's really, really special. I was telling a couple of ladies, it's really, really special to me to be here today because 3 of these ladies in here will remember well, and I will probably tear up a few times today. So just forgive me. I'll ask forgiveness right away. But 3 of these ladies were very special to me during the time of 9/11, and our guys were the first ones to go out, you know. And Mary Ann Cleveland and her husband were there. They were the group commanders for 10th Special Forces Group at that time. So they were amazing. Raquel and George Thebes came in during that time, and then, like I said, Carolyn and I were definitely battle buddies, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just want to preview this little book, and again, I'll stop because, can I have your name? You just spoke to me. Yeah, I'm going to embarrass you, sorry. Kim, okay. So Kim in the back came up to me and spoke to me a few minutes ago, and she said, I just want you to know that your book was given to me in Newport, Rhode Island. And I almost burst into tears then, because after you hear, if you haven't already heard what this little book is about, that brings me great joy, because if she got the book, it means that somebody reached out to her. And that's what this is all about. Yes?
I got the book in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yes.
I use my green, and I buy green plates at Walmart. Those plastic green plates.
Good. Good. You guys just keep it coming. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And you'll get this when we read the book in just a second. So before I read this book, I just want to give you a little preview, and I know everybody has a story, but yours may be a little bit like mine, I don't know, especially in the SF community. But, and I have to say, he's going to take a beating, because my husband has never ever heard me speak. And he's here today. He's on leave, and here's another thing, he's on leave, and he never ever takes leave. So, so let's give him a round of applause. So I said, you know, since you're on leave, you could come hear me speak if you want. And I know he thought, oh yeah, I've probably never ever done that. So so he's here, and he may take a little bit of a beating in all of this, because he's going to hear some things that will bring back good and bad memories. So just so that you know, I came from a little town called Talladega, Alabama. We're on the map because of NASCAR and Talladega Nights, just have to say that. But, and not real proud of that, but that's where I'm from. So, yeah, so I was a school teacher actually in a little town near Talladega, Alabama. And Ty was a second lieutenant, probably, at a little base called Fort McClellan in Anniston, Alabama. And they had a program, and correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe just don't, let me go with it. But they had a program with their officers there where I think they had to do some volunteer hours in the community and all that. Well Ty, I don't know if he chose it or somehow he ended up in my school. He ended up being a tutor in the afternoons for children in my school. And he used my classroom. And I was Miss Alverson at the time. And so, long story short there, you see how it ended up. The children, you know, with whom he met to tutor told him one day, Miss Alverson doesn't have a husband. You might want to ask her out. So let me give you a little bit more of an insight into our world. The first place he ever took me on a date was a Japanese steakhouse. And where was our first duty station? Okinawa. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of a lead in as to where I came from. I had pretty much never left Alabama except to go on vacation, and that was once a year to Florida, and that was a big deal. So, so having kind of given you an introduction as to how we met and embarrassing him today, which was one of my goals, I would like to read you my little book, and I promise it won't take long. But on today especially, I just ask that you let me indulge and read it, because it needs to be read today of all days, okay? So this is the green plate. And you guys will relate. I promise you'll relate. Home is where the Army sends you. That's what was printed on the plaque that hung beside the door of our new home at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. It was our third duty station since I had married into the military family. And if you allow it, that's what the military becomes, family. We were only to live there for a year while my husband attended school for commanders-to-be. Even though we were only to be there a short time, we learned that to enjoy the military lifestyle and sometimes just to get through it, we must reach out, meet people, and get involved in the community right away. This idea had become very apparent on our first tour of duty together in Okinawa, Japan. Being a small-town girl from Alabama in a foreign country, I soon realized that I could cry my way through the first 3 years of our marriage, being homesick and afraid, or get out and make it the best first 3 years of our life together. Through our church family and military family, some incredible memories and lifelong friendships were made. These friends were also there for us on the tour as I cried when my mother passed away, and we rejoiced as our son was born. Shortly after our son's birth, we moved to North Carolina, where we once again made friends that became family. God continued to add to our family. Now we were unpacking for the third time in Fort Leavenworth. My husband came home one day and said he'd met the guy next door, seemed like a nice guy. I was then inspired to stop packing and get ready to meet who I hoped would be my first new friend. Well, I'm from the South, and we're brought up to believe that to welcome someone to the neighborhood, food needs to be involved. Since cookies are usually a good, safe choice, I baked some and put them on a green plastic plate. I thought, it's a plastic plate. She won't even have to worry about returning it. When I rang the doorbell next door, a tall man with a big smile opened the door. And that was the day our friendship with Tammy and Dwayne began. Our family dynamics were quite different. They had a teenage son and a teenage daughter. We had a 2.5-year-old toddler. They were concerned with grades, driving, and dating. We were concerned with diapers, naps, and playtime. Even though we were different in some ways, we were alike in others. Something we recognized very quickly were our southern accents. Dwayne, Tammy, and I were all from Alabama. That's also where I'd met Ty, and both of our families had started in the same place. We'd both literally been around the world, and now here we were in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Dwayne and I discovered that we had both graduated from Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama, where he'd grown up. Immediately, there was a familiarity, and the more we talked, the more we learned that we all shared the love of a Christian home and an appreciation for what neighbors could be. As we got to know the other neighbors and got involved with different activities, Ty agreed to host a weekly Bible study in our home through the chapel on base. Dwayne and Tammy agreed that they would be part of our group. And as I mentioned before, when people from the South get together, there's usually food involved. As we all brought snacks to share at our first meeting, I just snickered as Tammy walked in with her snack on the green plate I had given her. She said, "I just couldn't return it empty." As the guys got into their schooling, the ladies of the neighborhood enjoyed playing with the little ones, venturing out to explore our new community and sharing craft ideas and new recipes. When weather permitted, we would sit in the front yard after the guys got home and just visit, the way people used to before we got so busy. Tammy and I would also try new recipes and pass that green plate back and forth to let our families try them out. It's amazing how quickly that year passed. Tammy and I shared many heartfelt conversations as wives and moms. Ty and Dwayne discussed world problems and the finer points of being good dads while washing cars, helping each other with household projects, and relaxing during their downtime. Dwayne and Tammy enjoyed encouraging our son with popsicles when he was successful with potty training, and we kept their children employed as babysitters and watched them mature. We just hoped that we could be great parents like them when our son became a teenager. In the spring, the husbands started receiving their next duty assignments. The neighborhood was abuzz with news of where these future commanders would work and where we would start over again with our families. We found out we were headed to Colorado. Dwayne, however, found out that he was headed in a different direction. I'll never forget the day we were out in our front yard and he walked out and said, "Pentagon, we're headed to D.C." And he was thrilled. As our time there drew to a close, we all dreaded saying farewell. And Tammy had told me that she didn't like goodbyes and that she would try her best not to have to say goodbye to me. The sweetest thing she could have done is just what she did. As we were all packing up, she brought me the green plate. She said with watery eyes, "You keep it." That meant so much to me. But I had no idea at the time how precious that one plate would become. A little more than 2 months had passed when we found ourselves once again settled in a new home in a new community. We missed our friends terribly, but we were enjoying sunny Colorado Springs, Colorado. Once again, we were blessed with new friends who made our transition much easier and helped us feel at home. Ty was busy with his new job, and I was happily teaching where our son attended preschool. When I got to work one morning, the school secretary stopped me as I walked by the office and said, "Hey, did you hear the news?" And that was the morning of September 11th, 2001. The Twin Towers had been attacked, and a little while later, we heard about the Pentagon and the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Ty came to the school and said, "Just go straight home, don't stop for anything. We have no idea what's going on." When I got settled at home, my thoughts immediately turned to Dwayne and Tammy, and I called and heard her voice on the phone, and that was a relief, as I assumed since she was at home that Dwayne was fine. I quickly asked, "Is he home? Is he all right?" She said very calmly, "He left this morning, and I haven't heard from him yet." I told her that we were praying for her and that I would hang up in hopes that he would call soon. Days went by with no word, and each time I would call to check on her, I'd hope to hear good news. And finally, we received an email from Dwayne's son that said that his dad had been found, but he had gone on to be with his Lord. Along with Tammy and the rest of the nation, we experienced sadness, anger, disbelief, and fear. Our world would never be the same again. Several years have passed and several moves have taken place since then, and each time we unpack, I unwrap that green plate. And I remember the possible friendships that await if we reach out and give of ourselves. With every move, we've been blessed with wonderful friends who we consider to be family. So yes, home is where the Army sends you. And when you're in your home, enjoying the freedom that you have, remember those who are in faraway places in harm's way, and those who have lost loved ones who served proudly and fought for that freedom. But I also encourage you to get out a cookbook and a plate of your own and spend more time with those who are around you. Get out and meet somebody new. You never know what tomorrow may bring. So that's my little story, and you guys probably have many stories such as this. I would imagine many of you could tell a story of remembrance about that day as well. But what has made this really carry on, not only remembrance of what happened that day, but carry on the, it's not a tradition, but it could become a tradition, a military tradition, to carry on this, this idea of reaching out. And I was so thrilled because I walked in late, but I heard so many wonderful ways that you guys are reaching out in your units. And so I'm going to share one last way, and this is through my story. And I'm going to ask Carolyn, and if anybody else would like to help. I'm going to give you guys a green plate book here, and there's a card that goes with it that tells about the story. So if you guys would give them a book and a card. The reason that I even have this in print is that we were actually stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia several years ago. And when I unpacked there, I got out that plate. And I told my husband, I said, "I forgot the plate." But that's okay because it's sitting in a very prominent place in my house, and it stays there. And I have it. And it's a beat up old plastic plate, but I have it. So anyway, when we were unpacking in Georgia, we were unpacking my kitchen things, and out comes the plate. And my sister was helping me at the time, and I just lost it. And she said, "You know, it's really neat how this brings back such memories, and how it reminds you not to waste time." And she said, "Jill, every time you know, I hear you talk about this plate or bring it out," she says, like you get a little spark, and you just like, okay, well, who can I meet now? You know what? Because I'm so thankful that I met that family that lived next door to us, because I met a hero before he was gone, you know. And if we hadn't met them, if we had just stayed hunkered down for 10 months and said we're just going to get through this and move on, would have lost a lot more than I did lose. So anyway, my sister said, you know, you really should write that down. Write that story and share it with people, because people need to hear that you don't need to waste your time. You don't need to wait on people to come to you and meet you. You need to get out there and meet them. And that's what I really started doing. So I have to tell you, I felt like at that point I had come from a long way from, Ty will tell you, I cried from Alabama to Okinawa. That's a long flight. I'm just saying, that is a long flight. And I cried from Alabama to Okinawa. Getting off the plane, he even said, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to send you back. I'm just going to send you back. So anyway, and now, I mean, we're kind of at the place in our lives where we're done. We're about to be done, and we're settled here in North Carolina. But there were many times when, you know, here in the last few moves that it would be like, okay, we're going where? I wonder what's waiting there. And that's a good place to be. So what I want to do today is just to share a little bit about how I got there, and I already have, but I wanted to share about how this has built up a little bit in my life. I ended up writing this story and sent it in as a 2-page little script to a publishing company, Tate Publishing Company, and fully not expecting to hear a word from them. Well, we were in Germany, and one night I got an email, and the email was from Tate Publishing Company, and they said, this absolutely needs to be published. We're going to publish it for you. So they published it, and while we were there, Ty was the commander of not a traditional SF unit. It was an Army unit. It was called 5th Corps. And it was in Heidelberg. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit overwhelmed when we got there, because that is a unit, and correct me if I'm wrong, of when we left it was about 1,400 soldiers, right? With about 4,500 family members that we were dealing with. And I know y'all are dealing with many, many as well, but I was a little overwhelmed there. And when I got there, the person who had been there before me, just kind of had a monthly meeting and said people can come, you can come if you want to get information and all that. So when I got there, I was encouraged to try to make it a little bit more, you know, how can we, with all of these people and with them at different stages, and I heard somebody else saying sometimes people trickle in. It's not, you know, people don't necessarily all get to one place at one time. What can you do to welcome people, to let them feel like they're wanted, and to just let them know that you're there. So I shared my little book with our FRSA at that time, and she is incredible. To this day, she's one of my best friends. But she was absolutely incredible. She said, "Oh, I've got it. This is what we do." And she said, "You know, we get green plates, and we fill them with homemade goodies, you know, and we wrapped them up." And we just put a little, at the time, we put a little a wooden heart that was painted in the colors of the German flag. It said, "Welcome to Germany." All we did was put a little scroll in there that said, "This is who we are. We're here. This is how you can contact us. And this is what we've got going on." Now, one of the differences in the way that we went about this was that and like I said, take this and use it as you will, if you can, to help you. But one of the things that we kind of started to hear from husbands was that, you know, my wife's not so sure about this. She's not so sure she wants to be a part of this. So instead of reaching out to the wives, what we did was that and it started just myself, our FRSA, and a couple of spouses, and that's not many in that huge unit. So we started getting the list of who was new that month. Let's don't start out with trying to do a huge unit thing. Who's new this month? So what we would do was bake goods, put them on, decorate these plates, put a little scroll in, and give it to the husband to take home. All right, that was where the difference came in for us. We started hearing back from husbands saying, you know, my wife said to tell you thank you, and she'll probably contact you. Gave her the total option of contacting us or not. Now I will say this is not the only thing we ever did, but this is something that really started working. Because what happened was, after a few months of doing this, a few of those wives who we had given green plates of goodies to as a welcome called us and said, you know, I don't know what I want to do to be a part of the unit, but I really like the fact that y'all welcomed me and gave me the option of being involved. So maybe, could I just maybe help y'all bake some cookies for the next welcome? We were like, yes. And you get them in there for that, and then they're welcoming, and then they're another, and they tell somebody, and they tell somebody. It started being wonderful. And another thing we did was we made sure that our single soldiers got these, and to let them know that we were there for them. Well, the single soldiers started finding out when Green Plate Day was, because Green Plate Day was when the spouses met in the Friss's office and put together stuff with cookies and candy, and they would meander by and got any extra cookies. So they would stop by the Friss's office. And so she started talking to them. I'm just going to tell you how this ballooned. So she would start talking to them, you know, what can we do for you? We're the family readiness group. Well, you're our family. You don't have family here. You don't have, what can we do for you? So I have to tell you, we laugh about it now because a few of the guys were like, well, it sure is nice to walk by here every month and get something homemade, you know, instead of just buying everything. And so it led her to talk a little bit more to them and say, well, what do you guys, do you just eat at the chow hall all the time? Yeah, pretty much, or go out or whatever. And, you know, she said, well, you know, you've got a kitchen in your barracks. Do y'all ever cook or anything like that? No, I don't really know how to cook. And so we're like, the first said, well, what if we taught you how to cook? They were like, yeah, that could be fun. So that blossomed into a whole new event that we started having monthly. We had cooking lessons in the barracks. And we invited spouses to come in and share recipes, simple recipes that wouldn't cost much to make. We started very small. We probably had 10 soldiers come in the first night. We ended, after doing it for a year and a half maybe, we ended at General Carter Ham's house on post, who was the Europe commander, with, I don't know, probably 300 people, 300 single soldiers and other people, because it had gone throughout the base, it had trickled throughout the base, and we would, what? We called it cheap eats, is what we did. We called it cheap eats. And people started hearing about cheap eats, and they're like, well, think about it, guys, cheap. There you go, that brings people in. And with guys and girls, eats. I mean, you can't beat it. So we had our last cheap eats at the General's house over in Heidelberg, and it made the Stars and Stripes. It was awesome. It was awesome. But if you think about it, that just provided a great sense of community. And I tell you, when I remember at his change of command, you know, I had so many. More of those single soldiers probably came up to me because I was kind of like a mom. I was like Mama Connett at that point. It's like, thank you. I can cook lasagna now, you know, just that kind of thing. Or if I ever get married, she'll love me because I can cook, you know, things like that. And we still hear from people from that particular time because it was such a special time. And then, like I said, my goal was to have people just continue to pass it on. That's my thing, pass it on. So I've had people from our unit there contact me and say, you know, I'm going to need some books and plates because I'm moving, and I want to meet new people. So that's at the group level or the unit level. But I tell you what's made it continuously special to me is I continue to do it on a neighborhood level. When I get to a new neighborhood, my husband and my son are the first ones to say, well, when are you going to start baking cookies? Because and it's not really a roll of the eyes, but it's like, I know it's coming. When are you doing it? And sure enough, you know, I'll bake cookies and go over and just introduce myself. And here's a little story I want to share with you, and we want to welcome you to the neighborhood. And the weird thing is I do it when I move in. I don't wait for that neighbor to come to me. I go and say, I'm your new neighbor, and I'm here if you need me. And I guarantee you they always turn around and say, oh my gosh, I'm here if you need me. And that just starts, whether you become good friends or just know that that person's there. So taking it from, you know, the neighbor next door to the unit of 4,500 soldiers and families has been an awesome thing.